Hello, friends. So happy to meet you here as we talk about compassion today. My name is Brandi Michelle, and I am a happiness coach. I help people who've had a lot of success in life and who've felt like that success would lead to happiness, but they find themselves on a hamster wheel where they're still seeking happiness, even though they've had a fair amount of success. I help them realize that happiness has to be a goal unto itself. It will not be an outcome of achievement. And it is the best job ever. So I have these lives twice a week. And on these lives, I always talk about topics that can improve and increase our happiness set point. And I love to meet you all here. I appreciate all the amazing feedback that I get from you. If you have any questions or comments along the way, please feel free to put them in the comment section. If you're here at a later date and you have questions or comments, then please also throw those in the comment section. And also just say hello. You can always say hello for those of you who are watching. I really appreciate that. So with that being stated, I have put my website here in the comments. So you guys can all learn a little bit more about a monthly program that I have. It launches on the first Monday of each month, and it's a 4-week program that has daily lessons as well as exercise to help you embody those lessons, all of which are geared towards prioritizing happiness and realizing that it is your birthright and there is a clear path to achieving it. And we also have a community group that you are a part of once you sign up for the course. And we have weekly coaching calls with me. And on those coaching calls, you can ask me any questions that you have or be coached around a specific topic. So I would love to meet you guys there. You can find out more at www.brandymichelle.com/the joy blueprint. Okay, so with that being stated, let's talk a little bit about compassion. And how do we cultivate it? How does it make it like a kinder world for all of us, right? So compassion really is a fundamental human quality. And it has like such a strong potential to like really connect divides, to connect people who have differences. And ultimately, these are the types of choices that we make and things that we implement that are going to impact our lives in a real transformational way, right? So we are right now in a world that is filled with division and strife. I'm not sure if it's more than it has been in the past. I know that it is more obvious and seemingly prevalent because of the news and the media and the speed and the rate at which we are exposed to information. And so I think that in and of itself means that the divide is more impactful to each of us because we have such clarity around, well, I don't know if we have clarity, but we have such depth of information around what is happening out there in the world and how there seems to be so much polarity between people and issues. And so that's why I thought it was really important that we explore this idea of compassion, and how we can think of it as this like force for change. Um, and it really is an integral part to our own personal growth, right? Because developing compassion is going to not just like impact the way you see others, it's going to, by definition, it has to impact the way that you see yourself, which is such a beautiful byproduct of this quest for being more compassionate. And so our level of compassion probably really stems for the amount of compassion and empathy that was extended to us as we were growing up and kind of like the lens through which we saw the world. And so, as I say on many of these lives and many times when I'm coaching people, that we have to take this like radical responsibility for changing our lives. And also, we really don't want to blame ourselves for where we are on this journey, right? Because um, where we are is like such a result of mostly our formative years around this collective consciousness. But it's beautiful to realize that we really are in such a powerful place to change our lives, right? And so it's not about like feeling sympathetic for others. Compassion is not about like empathy for others. It really is like deeper than that. It's this sense of concern and well-being for others' well-being, excuse me, and for our own well-being, right? And understanding like I try in most situations, let's be clear, I'm not perfect at it because we're all evolving, but I try in most situations to really pause and realize that like everyone is doing the best that they can, and that they are looking through a lens that may not be of their own making. Um, and that it is through people's suffering, all of our suffering. So my suffering, your suffering, everyone's suffering, that we are in a place where we kind of may hurt others, right? And also, when I'm being observant of another and choosing to believe that they're hurting someone, that is through my own lens, right? And so we all kind of like access the world from that place, right? And so we want to get to this like deep understanding um, that we're all doing the best that we can, that everything I do to others is because of me, not because of them. And everything others do to us is because of them, not because of us, right? And so when you are in this place of really realizing that, as we were probably told as little kids, like the world doesn't revolve around us. And so I think like we know that theoretically, but oftentimes when things are happening to us, or when we feel wronged, or like something isn't going the way we believe it should, we believe that that is like happening to us. And that is in reality, it's like we're thinking kind of like, oh, we're at the center of this all. And more often than not, we really aren't, right? And so we want to respond from this compassionate space. And the upside of that, right, is that the more compassionate we are, the more compassionate the world will be towards us, right? Because we have an aperture of how we see the world and what we take in based upon what we're giving out. So the world is oftentimes just reflecting to us. So we will find that people have more grace with us and more compassion with us the more we're able to give that out, right? And so in many ways, like many of these changes that I share with you guys that have helped me and I believe will be helpful for you, they're like a both and. Like I am doing this to be the best version of myself, and also my experience of the world is going to significantly improve when I focus on these things, right? And so to be clear, like the benefit of compassion is, like I just said, that like you'll start to see more compassion coming your way. And also others, you're going to positively impact the lives of others, right? And when you think about it, your response, your emotional response to a situation, when it is like many of those dense emotions that we have talked about in the past, those dense emotions of fear, anxiety, discontent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those emotions actually have an impact on you. And the denser the emotion, the more dense the impact is, right? And so when you think about it, being compassionate and having like this perspective about others, this beautiful perspective about others, is actually going to help your own emotional well-being. Of course, it's going to help you foster these more beautiful relationships. It's going to improve our overall kind of like mental health, and that we're not going to be like assuming the worst about others. And then from there, we're going to see that we have an overall improved sense of happiness and fulfillment. It really is like a win-win, as is all of this work that we talk about, right? Like both the recipient as well as the giver is going to feel like much better when we kind of cultivate this compassion. So how do we cultivate compassion? Like first, like we just want to be really practical and think about it like in our daily lives. So the first step is kind of a couple things that I mentioned earlier. This idea of that everyone is really doing the best they can. And when you really like hold on to that notion tightly, you're going to automatically have more compassion for other people. Because when we go into a situation with this belief that they could do better and they're choosing kind of to act in this way, then we don't give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So we want to really, really walk through the world like everyone's doing the best they can. If they could show up better, they would show up better, right? Like if we feel like something isn't going the way we would prefer. We also want to go through the world, as I mentioned earlier, like also realizing that like everything I do is because of me and everything you do is because of you. And that extends out to the rest of the world. Like people take action based on themselves and their experiences. Like when they snap at you or when they're being unkind or when people aren't able to show up in a way that they may have committed to, all of that is because of you. None of that has, or because of them, excuse me, none of that has anything to do with you. And like when you really sit in that space, you're going to be in a much better place personally. And then thirdly, we really want to cultivate compassion by just like assuming positive intent, right? So I think sometimes we have like such a knowing of why something has happened the way that it's happened, or we um we create an entire story in our minds around why people are acting the way they're acting, or we create a story that if they felt differently, knew differently, wanted something differently, they would behave in a way that is ultimately much like the way you prefer that they behaved or the way that you behave in those situations. And other people's experiences aren't the same as yours, not even your siblings, right? Like we all have these really unique experiences throughout the world, and those experiences shape my behaviors. And so when we try to say, like, someone should act in this way, or they would have acted in this way if they simply thought this or believed this, then we are oftentimes not going to be in a place where we're really extending to them grace and this belief that they're doing the best they can and assuming that they have these positive intentions, right? So when you assume people have positive intentions, then from that space, you're going to be more at peace, right? Instead of saying like they did that intentionally, right? Now, the biggest way that we're going to show up with more compassion is to focus on self compassion. So, all those other things I said are really important, but the way that you treat yourself, the way that you have grace with yourself is actually how you're going to experience other people, right? So, if you can be like really graceful with yourself and say like, oh, Brandi, you just made a mistake, it'll be okay, like we can fix it, it's not the end of the world. That is the way that you're going to treat others, right? So I see for myself, right, that over the trajectory of my life I have much more grace with others because I have more grace with myself. And so we really want to be in this place of like cultivating self compassion, right? So you want to treat yourself with kindness. You want to really have this deep understanding when you don't get things perfectly. You want to forgive yourself. The most important person you can forgive is you, right? And that is going to create this really great baseline for your ability to extend compassion to others, right? And so you just acknowledge every single day that we are imperfect beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to feel all the emotions. Sometimes we're not going to respond as our best self, and all of that is okay, right? And we're also like, when we do make mistakes, when we don't respond to our best, when we don't show up in a way that we would like to, then we acknowledge that both with ourselves and with others, right? Because then we teach people to have more compassion for us, right? So this weekend, I snapped at my little guy. He's like, Mom, don't yell at me. And so instead of like trying to explain away why I had snapped at him or to blame him because he wasn't listening the way that I would have preferred, I stepped back and acknowledged that, I did snap, and that's not something that I would have preferred to do, right? And then from that place, right, his 6-year-old self says, "That's okay, Mom." And so, and then we can move forward, right? Versus if I say, "Oh, you weren't listening. I told you we needed to get out the house and you're like procrastinating, yada, yada, yada." And then it just becomes a thing, right? And that happens in all of our human interactions, right? So when you can acknowledge your imperfection, you embrace it for yourself, you acknowledge it to others, then people really accept that, right? I remember there's a Harvard Business Review article that I read when I first became a leader, and it's entitled "Why Should Anyone Be Led by You?" And one of the main principles in the article is this idea that people really love to be led by people who demonstrate their vulnerabilities, right? Because perfection doesn't exist, and while we're all striving to be perfect, and none of us are, it's like this like really awkward and weird circle that we're all traversing. People actually really love to know that like the people they're interacting with also have vulnerabilities, also are not perfect. And so by expressing that, you allow other people to be more compassionate towards you, and you are having compassion towards yourself, right? And so another way to cultivate empathy, or excuse me, cultivate compassion for others is through empathy, right? And so we want to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Like so often we like really stand tall kind of on our own morals and values and ideas about the world, and we don't even like look at it from other people's perspectives and how things might have been impacting them, or how their worldview was shaped much differently from yours, right? And how people can feel as though things are being taken from them in instances, or people can feel as though their back is against the wall, and that makes them react differently. And so there's all of these things that happen throughout the world, right? Throughout our little corner of the world, that creates my worldview, and that causes my reaction to the world. And if you can put yourself in my shoes, then perhaps you may not agree, but you will definitely have more compassion, right? Because you're going to say, like, oh, well, this is the lens through which Brandi looks. And I can have compassion for that, even if I still disagree, right? And so when you strive, when you really seek to understand someone else's perspective, when you seek to listen to them, and to have this deeper level of connection and remove kind of these barriers that we have created in the world, and realize like through everything we have this like shared like humanity. We all are ultimately so incredibly similar, as much as we strive to like distance ourselves from others. um so we want to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We want to have compassion for ourselves. We want to know that people are doing the best that they can. We want to assume positive intent. We want to realize that everyone's doing things because of them and not because of us. And then we want to like just find little ways to cultivate kindness. So just like simple gestures where you're being kind as often as possible, right? Offering a helping hand, like paying it forward with a coffee in line, holding a door for someone, like, fast forward 24, 48 hours, like expressing appreciation for something that someone did, making sure that you're listening and not being distracted. Like all these acts of kindness are going to build that muscle of compassion, right? And compassion and kindness, these things create a ripple effect, right? Because it inspires others to do the same, right? And contributes to us uplifting society. Now, the hardest time to be compassionate is when we feel like personally attacked, right? And it feels like the divide is really wide. There's this bridge between us, and we really can't cross it. And oftentimes, those bridges are like built like in ways where we may not even know the people on the other side, right? And so this is what I say about kind of where we are in this time in our history. We have so much hatred and anger towards other people that we probably don't even interface with that often. And I laugh, but it's really not funny. Like people will post and post and post and post and post about things they disagree with that are happening in our world, when the irony is like the only people who are probably reading your post are people who actually actively agree with you. And maybe a small percentage of it is people who don't, but like your friends, whether they be your social media friends or your real friends, like in life friends, are probably going to be more aligned with you, like unless you have this like large media platform. And so we do these things, like we express our disdain for what's going on in the world. And what that does is just serves to build up our own animosity. And again, when we are feeling those dense emotions, they are impacting our health, like literally, right? And so we have to just take a step back and really try to have, like in these especially challenging times, like a more compassionate mindset, right? And to realize that like all of these people who feel differently from us or look at the world maybe differently from you, they're not just like crazy. They're actually like humans that are similar to you, and they just have a different perspective. And trying to be as compassionate as possible is going to make our world a better place. And I think I always end with these kind of like global ideas because, as I've said to many of you and many times as I close these lives or when I'm coaching people, like changing the world really is an inside job, right? Like we always think that the other has to change. But the best way for us to change the world is like personally. If I show up in this world as the best version of me, and that has a tiny little ripple effect outside of me, and then someone else wants to show up as the best version of them, and then suddenly we have 8 billion happy people. And what a world that would be, right? And so I fundamentally know that like focusing on compassion and many of the other topics that we talk about are going to be part of this ripple effect, right? So again, thank you guys for listening today. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, always drop them in the comments here or reach out to me through any of my social media channels or on email. And just know that compassion has a potential to like transform both you individually, the community that you're a part of, as well as the world. And if we embrace it to be kinder and more empathetic, and we extend this to everyone we meet, you're going to be in a much better place and you're going to contribute to the world being in a much better place. So thanks for being a part of this discussion today. I really appreciate you all for listening. I love the feedback that I'm getting about these lives. They actually like warm my heart so much. As you're exploring this, feel free to come back and share with me what you learned. On the 1st and 15th of every month, I do publish a journal entry also on topics such as these in written form. And so I'd love for you to join my mailing list on my website, www.brandymichelle.com. And don't forget, if you believe that going deeper around this work to increase your personal happiness set point would be helpful for you, if you ever feel like you have been on this hamster wheel just seeking happiness and it's not coming in the way that you want, I would love for you to join the Joy Blueprint. And it launches on the first Monday of every month. It's $497, and it will be so impactful for you as well as your family, both chosen and otherwise. Sending you all lots of love. Bye now.